Scott, you've had time now to reflect on the Under-18s Youth Cup final at Hampden. What's your thoughts on the game and how it all went?
Yeah, I think overall, Pete, the outcome was a bit disappointing, just in terms of obviously losing the game, and we didn't really threaten all that much. But a big part of the game plan was to make sure the game stayed as tight as possible for as long as possible, and then have a good goal towards the end. Because obviously, doing our research on Kilmarnock, I think they'd won 5-1 in the quarter-final and 6-0 in the semi-final, and they've got real potency in attack. So a big part of the game plan was to make sure that we didn't make it a basketball game, and try and control the game as much as we could and limit them to as few chances as possible. And obviously Warren had a good game with a couple of saves that he made, and then with the last half an hour we had a change of shape and had a go, and it just so happened that the goals we'll lose don't come from anything special. It's a set play and a deflected goal, and that's probably really disappointing to lose the goals in that manner. But in terms of the experience that the boys have all gone through, and myself included, and everybody that was involved in it, it was an amazing experience, and certainly a lot for me to take away and learn and reflect on, and the boys as well. We've got a lot of boys that can compete again this year, and not even just this year, but again next year in the same competition. So it'll give them plenty of experience to take forward into the competition again next year.
As you say there about experience, although the result didn't go our way on the night, there's so much the players and yourself can take from the whole cup journey, isn't there? Yeah,
like I say, the boys that have competed in it that won't be available for next year, they'll play in cups throughout the rest of their career, and the all the emotions that have came with it. We've been favourites in some of the ties, whether it's been at home to Banks of Dee or away to Fraserburgh. And then obviously getting the away tie to St Mirren in the semi-final, where we were probably underdogs. It gives you every different type of test that comes with cup competitions. So having to deal with the emotional side of it, and having to deal with the travel and the expectation on you and the expectation on the opposition, then the boys have taken a lot from the experience.
You must be so proud of the whole squad for the whole journey they've been on.
Yeah, not just the squad, to be honest. All the players, fantastically so, proud of them all. But the club as a whole, I think I genuinely felt like the whole club came together, and all the staff were really invested and interested, and to see everybody at the stadium, and really felt like we had the whole club's backing, and it was just a shame we couldn't get the result we were after. And but in terms of the overriding emotion, I would definitely say that pride is probably top of the list.
The 18s aren't the only ones to reach a cup final. We've got the 16s and the 13s and the CAS Cup final on Saturday in Falkirk. That's another great achievement for both teams, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's taken a long time, I think, for the academy to get into the sort of setup and structure and that we've got in place at this moment in time. But I think we're only really just starting to kind of scratch the surface in terms of the ability and the potential that we've got, and some of the young players we've got in the academy. And I think the body of work that's been done up to this point, the fact that the club are making it to cup finals now, and again hopefully this Saturday winning a couple, then I genuinely think for the future we're going to start to see these boys keeping into first team squads and hopefully making debuts, and because again that's what it's all about. That's what we're here for. But the success along the way is just a kind of marker and an indication of the level of play that we're working with.
How exciting is it for you as the head of the development squad to see these teams do well and players come through at young ages?
Yeah, do you know what? It's amazing, because again I'm sitting here in front of the camera doing this interview, but again the work that's gone on to get the boys to the level they're at before they even get to me, that's part of the reason that these boys are so good. The work that gets done in the academy that it's maybe not quite as highlighted, and it's not quite as you don't get the same notoriety for it. But again, right from scouting these players, and obviously the parents, the commitments that the whole families make, right through the academy, the staff that we've got, people dedicate so much to these young players' journeys. It's testament to the work that these people do, that the level of player that's stepping up to the it'll be now 17s and 19s in the new season. The level of player that's coming up is something that's really exciting to start working with.
One of the biggest changes to the academy over recent years has been the introduction of the performance school at St John's. What difference do you think that's made to the overall picture?
It's almost immeasurable. The work that's gone on, and I think probably one of the key components of that is the work of Greg McNaughton. You know, Greg works in the full-time capacity with us here at Gardyne with the development squad players, but he also goes back and works with the S1s. So, you know, they're getting that information from S1 right through the academy, working with everybody else in the performance school. And it's just consistency of language, consistency of coaching, real calmness and composure about him, Greg. And again, everybody in the performance school. But, you know, in terms of the work that Greg does, and that, you know, I don't think he's had a day off in the 2 years that he's worked here. You know, he's that type of person, and the academy's full of them. The staff just, you know, so dedicated and so committed to providing these opportunities for the young players, and the work that goes on in the schools. It's producing technically efficient, actually excelling in technique, a lot of them. That they're basically ready to come into a full-time environment and just, you know, thrive. So we're only really getting to see the fruits of that now.
And having the boys all together, you know, from such a young age in the performance school, them spending so much time together, that must make a big impact for when then they come to you.
Yeah, we genuinely feel like now we're actually starting to see the sort of, you know, the Dundee Football Club imprint on these young players, and the attitudes that they've got, and their work ethic off the pitch as well. You know, whether it comes to cleaning boots or tidying up after themselves after a game, or, you know, just professionalism, and they're coming in more mature than they have done in the past, and it's almost like really competitive environment as well, that no matter what they're doing, they want to be the best at it. And we do really feel like now that we've got groups of players that are coming in and hopefully coming into this full-time environment, you know, ready made to go and compete, and, you know, certainly cope with first team training no matter what age they are.
Just looking at some of the players that have made the first team from the academy, obviously, you know, Lyle is moving on at the end of the season. You've worked with Lyle from a young age. How much do you think Lyle's grown and developed since that young boy that made his debut at age 16?
Yeah, it's 6 years ago now, I think, that he first came in, you know, out with the performance school. And, it's great to see him go and get this opportunity that he's deserved. You know, he's not doing this off a fluke. He's had it tough. He's had a lot of hard work. He's had a lot of to be patient, and probably one of the biggest things for him was seeing a lot of his teammates at the time make their debuts before him. Probably have better loan spells, you know, and what I've saw in the background is Lyle just, you know, staying true to himself and staying dedicated and committed to being professional and doing all his work. You know, he was one of the first players into the building as a youngster, before some staff even at times, doing his prehabilitation and his gym work and stuff. And I look at him now, and, you know, people see him over the last couple of years, but I've watched him, you know, closely to begin with, and then obviously as he left the sort of development squad, he was more a first team player, and, you know, I've just watched him from afar, and always been here for him if he's needed me. But I'm glad to say, you know, in terms of the person he is, he's very rarely had to look backwards and ask for advice. He's so mature for his age. Still got a lot to learn, you know, and moving on, he'll have that big sort of jump, you know, in terms of level that he has to get to. But, you know, knowing him as a person, whatever's next for him, I'm sure he's going to take it in his stride.
Look, Graham's another one that's come through the development squad. He's been on loan at Falkirk, coming back with a championship winners medal. Yeah. You must be so pleased for Luke and for the journey he's had in the last few years. Yeah,
no, you almost couldn't write a better loan pathway for somebody to go on, where, you know, again, at 16, maybe 17, he was, you know, under 18s football wasn't testing him enough. He didn't have the challenges that he was needing at that level, so we put him to the Dundee Junior League at Lockheed United, and that provided what he needed, you know, in terms of the real side of the game, with the physicality and the direct play and stuff. And then he suffered relegation, sadly, with Albion Rovers, but he got that experience and that sort of jump up in level again. And then he was at Montrose in League One, where obviously they made the playoffs but missed out, sadly. And then winning the championship this season with Falkirk, you know, it's almost been a fairy tale loan pathway for him. And what he has done is he's taken every challenge that's came his way in his stride, and he's went and met it. And obviously, you know, earlier on this year he managed to be called up to the Scotland under-21s as well, which, you know, it's another feather in his cap. So he's you know, he's done a lot of good work, but again, he's had to fight, and there's been questions asked of him, and it's up to him to keep coming up with the answers. And he's in a good place right now, but again, as a person, he has to, you know, remain humble and keep working hard and always be looking to strive to be better.
These are the positive stories. Obviously, this is the hard time of the season when you're having to have difficult conversations with players, telling them whether they're getting a new contract or not. How do you go about making these decisions, and how does the club help those that aren't getting offered new contracts?
Yeah, well, it's very hard, first of all, to come to those decisions, just with having worked with some of the boys for so long, and seeing the development that they have made. Some longer than others, and again, some have developed more than others. And a lot of the time you try your best to get them out on loan and competing with men, and at whatever level that's at, you're hoping that they can go and kind of do, again, similar to Luke Graham, and go and show that they're good enough, if not better than the level they're on loan at. And you're in constant dialogue with the loan managers to check up on the development, and obviously we'll go and watch them ourselves as well. So with that, you kind of come to a decision if you feel like there's enough left in them physically, first of all, because obviously watching a lot of Scottish Premier League football, the physicality of the game, and not just in terms of bravery and strength and stuff, how fast the game is to be able to compete at that level. There's a big gap sometimes for boys to try and make that jump. So combining all that, we'll have to try and try our best to sort of come to the right decision that we feel that this player is still going to be able to continue to develop with us into a first team player. So, but it's very hard when when everybody comes to that decision that it's maybe not quite the time for these players, and that's all it is. What they've done, hopefully over the time with us, whether it's 1 year to 5 years sometimes, is they've learned enough to go and find another place to continue playing and developing. Because again, what we always try to focus on with the young players is what's next for them, whether that's a new contract here, whether it's not in football, whether it is in football, and whatever level that is. If things are going really well, what's next? Again, for Lyle, he's on to pastures new in the new year, but you should always have that mentality of never settling for what you've got, and if things don't go your way, then shift your focus on to what's next. So it's never easy, but we try our best to come to a calculated decision based on the player's development.
And it'll be really tough for the players when they get released. They're probably wondering what's next. But we've seen from players who have left in the past, Jack Wilkie at Arbroath, Danny Strachan at Peterhead, that there's different routes and different options for them, isn't there?
Yeah, and I love to see these young players going and doing exactly that. Whatever it is they're doing away from football, they've got the outlet still, the opportunity to go and compete on a part-time basis with these clubs, and they're developing still. And they're successful this season. Obviously, both of them are league winners, along with Luke at Falkirk. For me, that's just as much success for our academy as Luke Graham being called up to the Scotland under-21s, and Lyle now playing his games that he's played and moving on. So, again, it's so hard for players to make the grade at a club that's in the Scottish Premier League, but there's no saying that they can't make that through a different pathway, whether that's away from the academy and then in the lower leagues, to then build themselves up to the real game and then make their way back up that way.
And just lastly, what are your hopes for the development squad and the under-18s, going into next season? Yeah,
well, obviously it's a bit of a shift now with the shift of Club Academy Scotland now moving away from reserves to now under-19s. So that's obviously had an impact on some of the decisions that we've made. But what it does do is it allows us to then continue on with the performance school into a fifth year. So we don't have to make decisions on boys at 16. We would always encourage them to stay on and get their education. So we will have 5 years, 5 intakes across the performance school next year, which I'm not sure. I don't think the SFA have it set up like that, and I don't know about anybody else's performance schools. But the fact that we'll have 5 years of an intake, and the boys that will be in their fifth year will then come in and be integrated into the development squad, which will now be an under-19s team, which is why we've sadly had to let so many of the development squad go, because you can only play 5 overage players in this development squad rather than the reserves. So for me, that gives us great scope to allow boys to just have a little bit more time, show a little bit more patience, and if we can see them develop and pass under-17s, then they can then join the under-19s, concentrate on their education, get that in the bank, and then have a right good year or two at under-19s football in a full-time environment. So for us, the changes, we'll now go into an under-19s league and obviously an under-17s league, and obviously with the experience of this year making the cup run, we'd love to do that again, but I think that remains at an under-18s competition for next year. So a lot of the boys that played in that this year will have another good go at it again. And again, just want to be, as much as we'd want to be really competitive and do well in these leagues, you know, that the main aim is to try and produce players for the first team. So, you know, if there's a young player that we feel under 19s football isn't giving him the challenges that he needs, then it's to try and get him out on loan like Luke Graham did. So, you know, that would be the ideal pathway for some of these young players we've got coming in.
Great, thanks Scott, and well done for everything this season.
Cheers Pete.